What? Oh, I lost my connection here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Let's Talk Live podcast. It is July 26, 2023. I had a little bit of a connection issue there for a second, but we are back and we are live. I have a very special show for you planned today, and I'm very honored to have this guest live on the show today. We had some great communication over the last week, and I am just truly honored to have this special guest come in. But I'm not going to wait too much longer here. I'm going to bring her in. We have former FBI special agent and News Nation contributor Jennifer Coffindaffer joining the panel today. Hello, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm doing great. And I just want to say I'm honored to be here. Thank you for asking me. And I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So I wanted to just talk, obviously, Kohberger is obviously lighting up the airways, Twitter, YouTube. I mean, it seems like everywhere we turn, there's a new story or someone's trying to grip onto a new piece of information because they might break this case. But what I wanted to do is, before we get kind of into Kohberger questions, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the FBI and the FBI involvement in crime cases. My first question would be, how does the FBI typically respond to when law enforcement asks for assistance in an investigation?
Well, typically what happens, the chief of police will reach out to the head of the particular organization in terms of, is it an RA, that's a resident agency of the FBI? Is it a main office of the FBI? Anyway, they will reach out to whatever the office is in their jurisdiction, and they will ask for help. And specifically, they want things like resources, manpower, the lab, all those crime scene analysts, things like that. They just need help because they usually are with very small departments and don't have the training, the numbers, and so forth. So once that call comes in, typically the SSRA or the supervisor or the special agent in charge, whatever it may be, will assign a case agent. So they'll call somebody in and they'll explain the situation, and then they'll do the paperwork to what we call predicate the case. So they'll actually outline the situation. For instance, if it were the Idaho 4 case, they would say, listen, we've just had 4 students murdered in Moscow, Idaho, and they need our help. So that would be predicated, really pretty much a rubber stamp in something like this.
Oh, we might have a connection issue. Yeah, Jennifer's had some connection issues, so we'll try to get her back here in a minute. We'll wait for Jennifer to come in. Oh, I think we got her back.
Wow, that's so odd. Hopefully we don't lose each other.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm sorry. So you got a little bit cut off there. You were just talking about what their involvement is in the investigation.
Right. So hopefully everybody heard that. But essentially, the minute that paperwork is signed off on, and it would be quick, and they can even give verbal authority while it goes through the machinations of getting approved through our computer system. But at that point, all the wonderful resources of the FBI become available to that case agent and then to that law enforcement authority.
What is their involvement in, like, say, a PCA? So we look at, like, the Moscow police, they conduct a PCA, they write that PCA. Does the FBI actually review that material as well before it's passed into evidence?
Well, typically a probable cause affidavit that is to this degree, which was about 20 pages, and it was completed in a very short period of time. I mean, this took elaborate writing skills. It took the skills of multiple people to put in their parts. And I would submit that probably they had different authors write different parts. For instance, can you write the part FBI regarding to the cell phone information? To the lab people or a lab liaison, can you write the part concerning all the DNA and that analysis? And then they come together and they bring this product together to the affiant. And the affiant, of course, is working to weave all the parts together. And ultimately, it's his product that he understands, that he has read all the formative information that supports that affidavit, and then goes before the judge and swears to it.
Okay. Yeah. So the FBI, so when they come in, do they assume like the leading role, or did they take more a more passive role, allowing law enforcement to determine the significance of their findings in a case?
So we'll focus on, if it's okay, the Idaho for it,
Yeah,
because I will
absolutely.
say every case is a bit different. But
Mm,
in something like the Idaho 4 case, and I actually made a comment about this on News Nation. I think maybe it was to Newsweek, maybe it was to both, about how the FBI is, I think I said something like really in charge. And Chief Fry didn't really appreciate that comment, but what I meant was there were 60 FBI agents assigned full time. So imagine, as a case agent, you already have dozens of cases on your plate. You have things that are hopping too, but in this case, this was a matter of societal protection. They
mhm,
had a mass killer, potentially a serial killer
mhm.
out there, and so everything had to be dropped. So now you have 60 agents on top of that. You have Chief Fry, who was really at the head, because the buck stops with him because he has the jurisdiction. The Bureau doesn't. Now, we came to know that he truly did cross state lines to,
Mhm.
at
Right,
least, again, he's not convicted. He is assumed innocent until
right.
proven guilty. But that is what the evidence is showing us. If they would have known that from the beginning, could the FBI have taken the helm? Possibly. But typically, if it doesn't happen on a boat, a train, a plane, or in a national reserve, park, or federal military institution, it's not federal authority.
Mm,
So that's why the Moscow Police Department had the primary jurisdiction. And but that's not to say that those 60 agents aren't out there making their own decisions on a day-to-day basis. They're not calling back and saying, Chief Fry, is it okay now if I interview this guy? No,
right.
they are running and gunning with whatever they were tasked with. And same with all those analysts that were poring over the information regarding the Elantra. They are not reporting to Chief Fry. They're reporting to their supervisor
Mm.
at that division. So that's kind of what I meant in terms of the practical nature of it. The Bureau was running their portions of it.
Got it. Got it. So, is it permissible for the defense to utilize FBI investigation analysis, even if the prosecutors do not consider the findings relevant?
Sure. All of that discovery, all of those terabytes, what are we at now? 51
51.
terabytes or something like that. Yeah, all of that is going to the defense. And it's such a huge mission, because they're going to want to pour through all of that and see if there's any sort of rabbit holes they could go down. And it's a lot, but they're allowed to use anything, even if the prosecution doesn't use it in their case in chief.
Hmm.
Any one of those 51 terabytes the defense can run with and use to make their analysis of what they think happened.
Sure, sure. So I know just before we came on live, we were talking about like the really hyperpolarization of this case. How you
Mhm.
have just two extremes on both sides. You have like people that are ultimately in, the Koberger camp. And again, I want to make sure that we understand this on the live today. Brian Koberger is innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. He'll get his due date in court and go through the due process. On my podcast, what I believe is that the evidence is very strong against Koberger. So we were talking about hyperpolarization. You have, people on this side that are just so extreme that, this guy is the guy, but then you have, people that are just so much in the camp that this is an innocent guy plucked from society, frame job, the authorities are involved. There's other people involved. Where do you think that comes from? Inside people, or I've just never really seen, this much attention on a particular case like this. So I'd love to hear what your opinion is on that.
Well, and in backstage, we talked about how Gabby Petito, I think, was one of, a huge instance of media draw, social media attention, much like Scott Peterson was.
Yeah.
But of course, we didn't have social media like we had then, or Susan Smith. I mean, some of these cases that they're jaw dropping in what
I
was
mean,
done
OJ
in those
Simpson.
cases. O.J.
I mean,
Simpson,
yeah.
John Benet Ramsey. I mean, we could go on and on, but the difference now, I think, is the true social media making
Yeah.
such a difference. And I think I told you, I was talking to those in the media with the statistical numbers, and they said that Koberger just far
Crazy.
elevates above anything Gabby Petito in terms of social media and mainstream media attention. And that was really surprising to me. But what's more surprising is the polarization that you just mentioned. Of course, on Gabby Petito's case, nobody was polarized. Everybody said it was Brian Laundrie, even though there wasn't one probable cause affidavit for anyone to see. But then you look at Brian Koberger, and that probable cause affidavit is one of the best probable cause affidavits I've really ever seen written. I've written so many. Basically, what happens is when you're in law enforcement, and if you see a crime occur before you, you're allowed to arrest somebody, and then you have to go back and write a probable cause affidavit to support a criminal complaint, right? So that's outside of the indictment process or the information process. So when you write these, typically, you're just going to put in just a spattering of your facts, enough to get you over that probable cause hump. They went far beyond that in this affidavit, with all the information regarding the cell phones, regarding the videos, regarding the DNA, the sheath, the witness statement from Dylan Mortensen. It was, I call it probable cause plus.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've been able to really, it's the bedrock of what we know here in the public, right? Other than the sources that have leaked information, this is the true bedrock. And I think the reason it became polarized, it was not polarized early, if you'll recall. Everybody kind of said, wow. I mean, everyone.
Yep.
No matter who it was, defense attorney, non-defense attorney, it's kind of like how people are reacting to the Rex Heuermann now. And I think we're going to see a change in that one too. But in terms of people saying, he's not guilty, there's nothing there. And I think that in a lot of instances, and I actually did a poll on this because I love polls. They let me know what people are really thinking.
Yep.
And the poll really was about 90% that it was either people who are just trying to make a name for themselves and start a podcast or step into the media ring, or they're just individuals. You can picture them with their Twix on one side and their Coke on another, just typing away with nothing else to do during their day, but sort of troll and put out really the unbelievable for attention, right? So I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think to give credit where it's due, I think some people are possibly genuinely concerned about due process, and that because so many believe the evidence is so strong that he'll be sort of convicted in the public sector. But I think that is so ridiculous because most people know little to nothing about this case, except for all of us, right?
Right.
Newsies, true crime people, we know this case inside and out. Yeah. But if you go, as an example, I got my hair cut today, and I was talking to some of the ladies. They said, really? When were they killed? There were 4 people killed. Where?
Yeah.
When do I need to know about this? Yeah. It's hilarious. If you go outside of our forum, there's very few people.
Yeah, it's funny because I mention it to my colleagues at work, when I tell them about my podcast, and I'm like, I have this podcast and I'm covering this, and they're like, I've never even heard of that case. What are you talking about? It's crazy. It's crazy. So, going back into Koberger as well. So many, and going back to kind of in this hyperpolarization, many individuals believe that Koberger couldn't have acted alone. We've heard that many, many times, and they find it very suspicious that that's closely associated with the case where they think that this is, it couldn't have acted alone. It can't be, it has to be multiple people. So in your view, do you think there's any other particular parties involved? I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think so. And I may be wrong, because wouldn't we have heard that someone else would have been arrested already, or another suspect would have been brought forward?
Well, that's a great point. But no, I don't think anybody is involved, not only because nobody's been arrested, but also because this type of crime, and yes, there are killers that sometimes act in tandem with,
Sure.
there are killers like that. But this was so personal. This showed so much rage and loathing and preparation. This was something that was freeing for the person who did this. This was retribution after years of being made fun of, years of not being able to get, this is my opinion, the kind of person that Maddie and Kaylee were, the
Sure.
funnest ones at the party, the beautiful ones, the vivacious, the ones that walk into a room and people notice. This was truly a retribution for that. So it's personal. And it wasn't anything that somebody would involve somebody else in. And people who conduct this stalking activity, 12 times we've seen the phone in this area, people who do this, this is part of the enjoyment. This is the building to a full-on climax of power and control. And they're not going to want to share that. So way before Brian Koberger was ever arrested, I think most people in my position or a position similar, or that were with my sort of background, we all believed that this would have been done by one perpetrator.
Mm-hmm. So we recently just heard about the alibi, or the standing silent alibi. How do you perceive Koberger's recent alibi and his decision with his team to stand silent once again?
Well, it's interesting. I considered it kind of analogous to a backhanded compliment. This was a backhanded alibi. It wasn't really an alibi. It's basically saying, listen, we're going to use the prosecution's witnesses sort of against their themselves. And they're going to, through testimony and cross-examination, they're going to basically provide some sort of information that it really wasn't Brian Koberger there. That's kind of what they really, in a nutshell, are trying to say. That combined with experts, right? They're going to have experts on the stand to say, hey, he was actually in Alaska, according to his cell records. Okay, that's a bit out there, but you know what I mean. They're going to say he wasn't in Moscow, Idaho at the pertinent hours when the cell information that law enforcement has gleaned says he was there. They're going to pick apart the videos, even though we've really just seen a handful of the videos, and we've seen them in their worst state. We haven't seen them when they've been enhanced for better viewing. But they're still going to have experts to say, no, that's actually, a white Mitsubishi vehicle, or, whatever vehicle they choose. So believe me, they will have experts that will come forward, and this is their plan, but I don't really call it an alibi.
Sure. So, just asking you here, and it's a great segue to what you just actually talked about. So when Ann Taylor speaks about questioning the prosecution's witnesses, whom does she imply, and what does she intend to challenge in those questions during her questioning?
Such a great question. Such a great question. I think the number one person she wants to get up on the stand, as we've seen, is Bethany Funk.
Yeah.
She wants Bethany Funk to say, I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. And I can just hear her droning away saying, you mean 4 people were murdered a floor away from you, 2 floors away from you, and you didn't hear anything? Dylan Mortensen heard things. You didn't hear anybody come in. You didn't hear the dog bark. And so I think she wants to turn Bethany's Funk's possible, admission to, I was asleep and didn't hear anything, turn that around. I think she also can't wait to get her hands on Dylan Mortensen. Um, we'll see how well she holds up. I could tell you from somebody who's been on the stand for hours and hours and hours as a case agent on different cases, it's grueling. Just imagine if you're sitting there in the hot seat and you have attorneys, 3 attorneys in this case, right? Are they up to 3 or 4 right now? I think there are 4.
Or
Sorry, they just got the
yeah,
DNA expert
yep,
attorney. 4 attorneys that have spent months and maybe by that time years figuring out questions, forming ideas from 51 terabytes of information, doing whatever they can to discredit Dylan Mortensen, whoever's on the stand. They'll look at a minor case. I'll tell you something I wrote on a tweet accidentally, even though I've talked about ground penetrating radar and known about it for years and years and years, a decade. I put ground penetrating sonar. I don't even know why I put that. It was just kind of a brain fade. So I've got 20 tweets talking about GPR and 1 tweet where I accidentally wrote sonar. And somebody, of course, pointed that out, right? That's what it's like on the stand, only it's happening real time. And you accidentally say sonar and they say, see, you didn't, you weren't even there, were you? Because she's going to, say, oh, I also saw eyelashes. Oh, you didn't say that in the probable cause affidavit. You didn't say that in your first statement. So I worry about that young lady. I think she's going to be emotional. She probably has a lot of guilt for surviving, a lot of guilt over actions she did and didn't take. I think they are salivating to get a hold of her and try to turn her words upside down. She's a woman with likely absolutely zero experience testifying. And so those are the 2 main people I think she's going to focus on.
Yeah, I've been saying here on my podcast and on my shows that I just feel like Ann Taylor's approach, and I call this kind of like the O.J. Simpson approach. She's gonna attack the DNA evidence. She's gonna attack the sheath that we know of right now. She's gonna attack the witnesses and their credibility. She's gonna get law enforcement on the stand and challenge their records. How did you collect the evidence? How did you bag the evidence? What was the process? Did you wear boots in the house? Did you have suits on? I feel like they're almost like, I feel like we're going to go right back to O.J. Simpson, and that's going to be the defense here. I mean, am I wrong on that, or do you kind of feel that as well?
I feel that as well. I think it is going to be a lot of mud up against the wall. Let's just see what sticks. We only need one juror, one juror to have some sort of sympathy or doubt, and then it could be a hung jury. So that's what they're hoping for, certainly. I agree with you. I think the good news is, and I know some people aren't going to like me saying this, but I don't think it's going to be televised. It may be streamed and then later they'll release it how he's done the rest of the hearings or the hearings today. I don't even know if he's going to allow that. I say that because we are talking about victims, victim statements. If it were me, I certainly wouldn't. If I were the judge, I don't want a menagerie. I don't want all this posturing and posing and acting and like what happened in OJ. And I think how they handled, I believe, Lori Vallow. The Lori Vallow case, they just had people, making drawings and reporting on what happened. I hope they do that. I know that upsets some people because they feel like they have a right to be able to see the proceedings. I always look at only 4 things in this case: Xana, Ethan,
absolutely,
Maddie, and Kaylee. And for them to get justice, to me, that's all we should all really care about at the end of the day.
I think I think for me, having that camera in the courtroom and just having it live is gonna give us the best transparency that we can see, because there's so many questions in this case about, isn't an Elantra or isn't an Elantra, the knife sheath, where's the murder weapon? I just want absolute complete transparency for these victims, because they deserve that. And I just feel like there's been so much mud that has slung. And again, we're going back to that hyperpolarization where everything, it's been slung on both sides. And I think the fairest way to do this is, have that camera in the courtroom. But I do agree. I don't think that we're going to get that. I know we all want it. But it just might not happen. Just even looking at how Judge, which has an amazing name, by the way. I love that name. How
Judge,
he, how he even just said, like, look, during these proceedings, if the camera is going to be completely on Koberger, zooming in and zooming out all the time, I'll just shut it down in a second. So, I mean, I know he's going to be ultimately very fair through this trial and wants to be fair, because this trial is so important to this community, the nation and the world, to get it right. And, if Brian Koberger is guilty, then he deserves to go away, or he deserves the death penalty in the state of Idaho. But if he's not, and he is innocent, and the jury and the evidence shows that, then we still got a lot of work to do. And I say that just in the community, they still have a lot of work to do to investigate and find out who did this. So, if I can. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
I said, no, I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you about the transparency. I just don't know if it has to be on camera transparency. We need to know about everything that's presented and, see all the evidence that has to be done. Can it be done without cameras is the question. And remember, I don't know if you remember this, I bet you do. When Judge was on the stand, he pronounced 2 of the victims' names inaccurately, and he was crucified in mainstream media, social media, all forums. I mean, the victim parents were mortified about it, at least some of them, and came forward. My point being is that gave him a taste of what 1 or 2 mistakes can mean to him. And I think that will come to bear when we don't see cameras.
Yeah. So if I can just go into the 911 call, because that has been the biggest, one of the most hyperpolarizing, parts of this case. What do how do you interpret the significance of that 8-hour delay, or how do you process that? What in your opinion might have happened? I don't know if you've talked about that, but I'd love to hear what your opinion, might have happened.
Well, so the first person that would have known about this and knew about it the whole time was Dylan Mortensen, right? We don't have any other information that anyone else would have been first to really realize that something happened. Now, I think she didn't know anything about the murders. She certainly knew there was an intruder. What that intruder had done, I don't think she had any of the faintest idea. I think she locked herself. She peeked out. I'm picturing this.
Sure.
She peeked out for a 3rd time. Her eyes probably got about this big. And she was just completely frightened. And who wouldn't be, by the way?
Right.
You're 21 years old. By all accounts, she was heavily intoxicated. I should say heavily. Let's just go with the word intoxicated. And it was very late at night. So all of us know what it's like to be up at 4 a.m. at some point in our lives. You're exhausted. And I think she closed that door, really just trying to deal with the fright she was feeling. I think she is one of the people in the flight, freeze, or fight syndrome that totally froze. I think she receded to her bed and just passed out, fell asleep, never to wake up again for hours. I think when she did wake up, that part of the puzzle is confusing to me, because did Bethany wake up before her? Did anybody just come over to the house and open up that door and see something first? We know there was a crew of kids there.
Yep.
And we've heard so many rumors, including one from a mother, right? That really gives a full account of what happened. I don't know whether all of that is true or part of it's true. I think in the FBI, we have a saying that where there's a little bitty seed of a rumor, it usually will lead to the truth. It's
Yeah.
usually like this much that you hear through the rumor mill, but then you can find the truth from it. So I certainly think that it's terrible, the hiatus of time. From what I understand, it wouldn't have saved a life because they were so brutally murdered. But it's hard to explain. People are angry, but I think that that is just very simply what happened. I can tell you, I have 20-year-olds,
Hmm.
20-year-olds that go out, and these 20-year-olds get home at about 2:30 in the morning with all their buddies.
Yeah.
They order a bunch of pizza. They all sit around and talk about goodness knows what. I can hear them. They're hilarious, you know. And then they finish the pizza and then they all go to bed. And then
Right.
at noon, they get
And then they
up.
wake up. Right. I remember those days.
Yeah. I mean, many of us have been there, and it's pretty normal in the college life, you know, for
Yeah.
a college student. And so while it seems odd to a 40-year-old who doesn't have that lifestyle, it is so normal for a 20-year-old. And I can just see her waking up, you know, at whatever, 9, 10, 11 o'clock thinking, was that all just a bad dream or what happened? And
Right.
coming out, and then who knows what she saw at that point.
Let me take it back to the PCA really quick, and I've always wondered this, and we've talked about this a lot. So it says in the PCA with referring to the time frame, it says, with the downloads of Bethany Funk and Dylan Morton's phones, we believe that the crime happened between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. Do you think, in your opinion, that there's any possibility that Dylan or Bethany Funk might have been texting during that exchange, or there was some phone calls in the house that evening, maybe out to the corresponding phones saying, hey, what's going on? Do you hear what's going on? Do you think that that might have happened?
I do think that's possible. I really do. I think they could have been texting boyfriends, texting each other. I think, Dylan could have texted Bethany and just said, oh my gosh, she won't quit playing with,
Sure, sure.
Murphy. Who knows?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's a great, very detailed little catch and find there that they put in there. And I think they had to put it in to really define why we're looking at this 20-minute window. And I think that it's the cell phones are going to tell a lot of why they
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I think Cass is going to come huge in this case. I mean, as we saw in
Mhm.
Murdoch, I mean, it basically placed him within feet, almost inches of where that crime happened. And as much as people try to dismiss this, I think that there's going to be multiple ways within that cast information to really lock in Koberger allegedly in this area around King Road, within the time that they said that. And I think that, going forward, as this information evolves and we have, what are we at, like 5G now, and we have all these super towers and, all these cameras that are everywhere. And I think that CAS is going to be a very significant, important in cases in the future. And I think that, it's really, when people say, I wasn't there, well, you had your cell phone with you and we can locate you. I think this is going to be a huge factor in cases going forward. How do you feel about that?
I think you stated it so well. I mean, really, the CAST report, which is going to discuss all the cellular information, the CAST team is in headquarters in the laboratory. They are amazing. This is
Mm.
what they do as special agents and supervisory special agents. That's the one that testified at the Murdoch case. He's really the king of CAST, and he's going to be able to make all the mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
He breaks it down and makes it very easy to understand. He's going to have amazing charts. He's going to show why it's really a science. It's foolproof. It doesn't go away. And it's like a fingerprint or DNA. It's there, and they're going to be able to show it. So they can bring in all the, experts that they want to say, well, really, couldn't it have been there? No, they're going to prove it. I agree with you. It's going to be a major part of the case. And we're going to know probably the first individual that came upon the bodies,
Yeah.
because that cell phone, because those kids, they're like an umbilical cord.
Yeah.
It's going to be with those kids right when they found the bodies. We're going to know who found it, who all saw it, who ran out of the house, who collapsed. I think we're going to know all of that as part of the cast report.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, the most anticipating moment for me right now is that opening statement, to start giving some, because this is the thing, is like everybody keeps saying they read that PCA and they think that that is the only evidence that's going to be introduced in this case. I'm like, it's probably 5 to maybe 20% of what we heard yet. A case in people don't understand sometimes is that a case is constantly investigated while it goes through trial. There's other evidence that could be entered as well too. And I just don't think that all the cards have been laid on the table. We're going to hear some really, polarizing evidence when this starts to come out. Just in my opinion.
No, you're right. In the scheme of things, if you think of it as a deck of cards laying down there, all the suits, right now we're seeing about the 2 through 5 of clubs.
Yeah. So we got a lot more to go here.
We got a lot more to go.
Yeah. I want to talk about some recently leaked video footage of security cameras. And there's been countless Twitter feeds about it. There's been countless YouTube videos about it. I've talked about it on my show, and it's surrounding in and around the activities of King Road that evening. So I wanted to get your opinion on it. A couple things. One, do you think it's credible? Two, why would this footage be, leaked? And, maybe in your opinion, if you feel that it's credible, who would get a hold of this stuff and leak it, and why?
Well, all such great questions. And it's kind of like when the sound came out, that sound piece that was thought to possibly be right. And then now we have this video. When I see these things come out and there's zero source, they just kind of show up on the Twitter waves.
Yeah.
When I see that happen, it immediately alerts me as to whether it's really credible or not. This one seemed more credible than normal. It really did look like, I thought, sort of a Ring camera.
Yeah.
The way it was situated. The timing is off, right? A lot of people, I won't name names, but we're making a big deal about the dark, shadowy figure, but they forgot to look and see it was 1 o'clock in the morning, not at 4 o'clock in the morning. And then, because people are want to just, look, I'm the first to come up with this. Look, I'm the first to see this, and not really evaluating. So at the end of the day, I think the truck that is seen on that video, if in fact it's accurate, is totally inconsequential. To really understand this case, I think, is to know what it is to live like in a small college town.
Mm-hmm.
People are up at 4 in the morning. Now, is it quiet on the streets? Yes. But I'm just saying, compared to a lot of other places in a college town, you're going to still have people up that just finished that pizza and they're headed back across town. So anyway, I found nothing important at all about the truck, if it's even real. Back to the footage, though. The PCA is so specific about the turns he took. And if you look, and I was going to actually post this, the cameras that I think are actually involved. There's 3 other cameras that I think that they use, and I'm sure there's many others that we can't see. But just in looking at, different photographs.
Yep.
I think that's what was used to show his drive-by, his 3-point turn, his leaving, his coming and going. I don't know that this footage definitely was important. Could have been. So back to my opinion, all of those videos and sound bites, things that come in, I pretty much ignore. For me, it's not important. What's really important is the PCA and what it says. And if that video perhaps gives a small snippet that corroborates that turn, that's great. Yeah. But it's so unimportant in the big scheme of things. That's how big scheme of things in terms of what it's really showing us is nothing we didn't know.
Yeah. So I got two more questions, and if we could, and I want to just again thank you for your time today. This
Okay.
interview has been great. I know my audience really appreciates, and I appreciate it as well. I got two more questions for you, and if you don't mind, if we could take maybe a couple questions from the chat, and
Absolutely.
all right, we'll pull those up in a couple seconds. So, among all the various types of evidence that we've seen so far, we've heard about evidence, we've heard DNA evidence, video footage, the 51 terabytes of digital information, eyewitness accounts. Which piece of evidence do you believe is going to be the most compelling and influential during this trial?
The DNA. People want to downplay touch DNA, right? The differences between DNA. Did it come from a hair follicle? Did it come from blood? Did it come from semen? Did it come from saliva? No, this came from touch. So if you can imagine that sheath, and for those of you in your audience, or you perhaps that carry a knife, I carried a knife for years on the SWAT team. When you have a sheath, it has to be snug and it has to be tight. You can't risk either one reaching down for your knife and it's not secure and you cutting yourself,
Mhm.
or losing it as you're running or as you're tackling somebody that you're supposed to be arresting. You can't risk that, right? So I kind of wanted to reiterate how tight a K-bar nice sheath snap is. And I welcome any of your folks to go check it out. It's tight.
Yeah.
It's not like a little snap on your dress. So you can imagine the friction that would come when you go to unsnap that, and then the cells on your fingers and the liquid in your fingers, right? That
Right.
perspiration, that sweatiness, that all
Skin
came off.
follicles. Yeah, your
Yeah,
skin. Yeah, because we constantly
exactly.
shed. We
You're
constantly shed.
yeah, and this isn't just shedding.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't just I touched this
Right.
chair. This is friction
Right.
causing that. And I think
Right.
that's why, luckily, there was enough of it, and luckily it was there. And so I think they're going to be able to explain that. And for all the people who say, let's look at our choices, right? Okay. No, he touched somebody who then touched somebody who touched the sheet. They shook hands.
Right.
That's not going to fly, because where is that person's DNA?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, he did touch the sheath, but then he sold it or somebody stole it. What evidence do we have of that? And then that person just happened to go kill these people?
Mm.
The person who stole the sheath, or the person he lent it to. It's just, there's Occam's razor is a philosophy that those of us in law enforcement trying to solve crime always use.
Mhm.
And it comes down to this: the easiest and simplest solution is usually what
Use.
happens.
Yep. Yep.
You don't have to extrapolate all these. It's really quite simple. And when you start trying to weave in really the unlikely next to the impossible, it just doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And I think that DNA is going to stick. And I think that's going to be the huckleberry.
Mm. So I got one more question about the trial, and then maybe we can take some audience questions. So real quick, do you think, and I don't think so, do you think this trial is going to happen in October? And do you think that we see a change of venue?
It will not happen in October. Maybe October of 2025 or 2026. I don't look for this trial to happen for a very long time from now. There's 51 terabytes. This defense team is 4 lawyers strong. Right now, we already know of at least 3 experts that have been hired. They have to have time to write reports and to
Mhm.
mull over evidence. There's just no way that this can happen earlier. Now, could he plead? It's a possibility.
Mhm.
Um, but the bottom line is, I think it's going to be a long time from now.
Sure. All right, so we have a question here from Lou, and Lou asks, Jennifer, can you explain the significance of the DNA at the time of the case pre-trial versus the DNA coming up from other locations of the crime scene during trial, and how Bill Thompson will present this?
Okay, so right now, the only DNA we know about, I want to make sure I get Lou's question right,
Sure.
is the DNA on the knife sheath.
Sheath.
And
Right.
right. In fact, we have heard through, well, not heard, we read through the defense documents that according to the defense, there wasn't DNA, didn't talk about bodily fluids, something that could have been degraded. It only said DNA was not found in the apartment, the office, the car, or his parents' house, right? That from the victims.
Right.
So they made that crystal clear. That was their way of really, trying to throw in a little reasonable doubt to me, to the public. What they didn't say, and did you notice this? They didn't
Yes.
say that there was no DNA of Brian Koberger's found at the house aside from the sheath.
Right.
I think if there would have been no DNA of Brian Koberger's found anywhere in that house, I think they would have pointed it out. I could be wrong. Maybe they just were remiss. But so right now we don't have any other DNA. If there is any other DNA that comes in, they will definitely have to deal with that, what type it is, where it came from separately.
Sure. So Jessica has a question. She's asking about what you think about the latent footprint. That's been a big question as well, too. Yes.
Such a great question. So we all know that that footprint was not visible, right? They had to do special testing with amino to pull out and to actually even see that footprint, which I also found very interesting. I really am of the belief that he was well shrouded, if you will. I think this is just my belief. I really believe he had a full-on black,
Yeah.
tight pantsuit underneath a coverall type situation. I think he personally stripped it all down, threw it in a bag that he had on the ready in one of the cargo pants pockets. And I can tell you, yes, that's easy to do. You just fold them up. They're right there in your pocket. We do it all the time.
Right.
And I think when I say we do it all the time, when you need a bag at a crime scene or something like that, these
Sure.
cargo pants, they can hold a lot. And I think that's what he did. And I think he disrobed. And why do we see one footprint? I think for those of you who have been to a stabbing, but some of your audience may not have, it's not like there is blood everywhere on the ground, right? Now, as you're stabbing, you get blood all over you. It spurts out. You hit arteries. It's on walls, on ceilings, on your face, on your body, right? It's all over this way. But then if you're laying in bed and you're attacked in your sleep, like I believe Maddie Mogan was, and you're ruthlessly attacked, that blood is going to seep down and drain slowly, and then drain toward, depending on the elevation of the house, toward the side of that room, which we saw.
The low point.
Yeah, the low point, right? So not necessarily where your feet would be standing. I mean, the feet, that's the least part. So it made sense to me that maybe one foot actually got in some blood and one didn't, because I don't picture the blood being there. In fact, I think that blood would have been later, probably from the encounter with Xana and Ethan.
So I have a question from Laura. She says, what is the significance of Brady Giglio to do? Is it to do with the case or a previous instant? I believe, and she's saying, I believe a previous instance. Sorry.
Well, it could be both, but typically what happens, for instance, let's just talk about Giglio. And I pronounce it Giglio. I've heard other people say Giglio.
I say Giglio.
I pronounce it Giglio. There's Giglio. Anyway, we always called it Giglio. I don't know if we're right or wrong. There were agents that had Giglio because at some point during their career, they did something where they either lied about it or they did something that caused an issue for their credibility and they could not testify.
Got it.
When that happened, typically the U.S. Attorney's Office was notified. There literally is like an index of who those people are. And agents can actually go on to some become coordinators, right? They coordinate dive teams. They coordinate the informant room. And so they don't necessarily have to be fired depending on what happened. Now, if they were under oath and lied, they're automatically fired. But I'm talking about something that would be more subtle than that. Maybe something that happened in their personal life with a spouse or something like that, right? But nevertheless, it's Giglio, and they can't ever testify again. The Bureau would never put anybody out there with any Giglio. They're on the surveillance squad. They're being a coordinator somewhere, something like that. Okay. So same in law enforcement. There are people that have Giglio, and typically when that happens, say they go on an interview, there'll be somebody that's clean or doesn't have a Giglio issue. And so they might go and help. But the person who testifies, the person who is the affiant, the person who writes the report is going to be that person with that Giglio. Okay. Brady is a little bit different. Of course, Brady can be anything of a negative nature that has to be disclosed to the defense. So the defense has full knowledge of anything that could be of negative impact to that case. And so they're a little bit different because one is more pointed actually on the agent or on the officer's behavior. If that helps. Hopefully that does.
It's really great.
I'm
Thank
just
you.
tearing it down to pragmatically what it means. We could talk about legalese all day long, but it's more important, I think, to understand what does that mean to this case and to those agents and officers.
Sure. So we have the mystery question, and this is the $1 million question. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. This comes from Diana, and she says, do you think that they have the murder weapon, of course, in the Brian Kohberger case?
All right. You ready? Negativo. I really don't think they have it. I could be wrong. I don't think they have the knife. I don't think they have the bloody clothes. I don't think they have the booties. I don't think they have the gloves. I don't think they have and I'm going to say this right, the balaclava. Not the baklava. That's a dessert.
The balaclava.
Basically the mask or the cap. I don't think they have any of that. I think in that time frame that he left that house and he was gone, driving around those back roads, I think he buried it or somehow got rid of it in a waterway. He did something with it. This is just my belief.
Sure.
I don't think we'll ever see it again unless he someday cooperates and tells us what he did, or law enforcement gets lucky, because law enforcement does get lucky. So that's possible. I think the knife that was recovered from the house, some have I think one was a Smith & Wesson and the other one just said knife.
Number one just said knife.
Knife, which to me means they had a knife, no designation on it. So I don't think so is the short answer. Sorry, I gave a long answer.
That's okay. That's okay. We love long answers. So Angela's asking, why do you think they still haven't released the 911 call? That's been the big thing here. Another mystery in this case.
They aren't going to. That is a huge piece of this case. That is going to disclose who found the bodies likely. It's going to disclose all the mania that was occurring in and around that house, who was there. So a lot of people who don't want their names out in the public, they're going to want to protect them. There is no way we're seeing that till trial. That's my opinion, unless it's leaked.
Terry's got a quick question. She says, why would the defense leave themselves scrambling during the trial with cross-examination if he has an alibi?
Because he doesn't have an alibi, Terry. He doesn't have an alibi. If he had an alibi, he would come forward. He would have at least the witnesses or what makes up that alibi, because that has to be presented so that the prosecution has a chance to question those witnesses, to look at the facts and circumstances that would support an alibi. This makes it very clear there is no alibi. And as I said, truly, they're just hoping that they can get one of their witnesses to slip up and say something that would be positive for them. As an example, if they can get Dylan to say, Really, I think he was only 5'5" and weighed
Uh,
like 300 pounds.
right.
You know, that could be exculpatory and show that, see, my client wasn't there. My client doesn't look like that.
Right.
This is the type of what they're trying to do, in my opinion.
Sure. Do you have time for just a couple more questions?
Sure.
Okay, great. Appreciate you. Karen's asking, and then we're going to go back to some old school detective work here. And they used to pull the photos out, and they'd show you little lineups. So Jennifer's asking a question. Jennifer, do you think Dylan would have been shown a photo of Koberger and asked to possibly confirm that's who she saw?
No. I think, of course, she was interviewed well in advance of anyone knowing about Brian Koberger. She would have been interviewed not for a few minutes. She would have been interviewed, my belief is, for hours. And I think she would have been interviewed definitely more than once. That would be the normal protocol. As they went back and maybe had questions, also as she started remembering more clearly. No, I don't think they showed her a picture of Brian Koberger at all. I think they strictly went off of her information about what she thought she saw that night.
I got a quick question for you, actually. When do you think Brian was, when do you think that Brian was interrogated? There's a rumor out there that he had been questioned for about 15 minutes and then shut down. Do you think that Payne was actually the person that did speak with him? And if he did, could it have been in person, or would they've done maybe like a Zoom call? Because there's a rumor out there that happened.
Oh, I don't think that's a rumor. I do think he spoke early on, like in a cooperative mode. And I think that the Moscow case agent, Payne, and others would have been flown out there. Certainly, they knew the most about the case. They would never put that, no matter what, when you're the case agent on something like this, you fly to where it is because you know so much. And then I think he shut down,
And
like you said, 15 minutes very early.
Yeah. Okay. Because there was a lot of back and forth about that. I heard a lot about it, and there was a lot of rumor of like when that happened, when could it have happened, did they fly there, were they on the plane when he was extradited? It was just a lot of questions to that. So, so again, another quick question here: Jennifer, do you think that the crime was sexually motivated at all?
So when we say sexually motivated, there are different sorts of people who commit these crimes, like, say, a John Wayne Gacy, or a Jeffrey Dahmer, or a Bundy, or a Dennis Rader. Those particular killers, they reach climax because of the control that they exercise, because of the position of power, even by just doing the surveillance and just the working up to that climax. And then certainly the kill is sexual in nature, but led by power, if that makes sense. It's the power and control that leads them to climax.
Yeah.
This killing is not like that. This is like a Jack the Ripper. This is like an LA Ripper. This is like the Roger incel. This is truly, again, this is my opinion, a loathing. This is a hate. This is nothing that was sexually gratifying. This was gratifying in every way, but not to reach somebody to a climax. That wasn't his purpose. It was really to exercise complete power and control.
So I have one more question, and then so we got here from Laura's asking regarding the latent print. Why or how was the print latent?
When they call it latent, latent is another word for hidden. It's something that can't be seen by the naked eye. And so they have to use special chemical products and so forth to retrieve it, much like a fingerprint. A lot of fingerprints, some you can see on glass, but many fingerprints are left that we can't see. And then we use special products to lift that fingerprint out based on aminos and oils and things like that.
Great. I appreciate that. Listen, Jennifer, I appreciate you for your time. I appreciate you here for your service to our great country. And, we love you here on LTL Podcast. We follow you on Twitter. We always bring up your News Nation videos and discuss them here on the panel. And we have a really good time with that. So,
Thank you.
listen, I really appreciate this. To give a smaller channel, to have this opportunity to meet with someone that's on a national world news station it's a real honor here. I know my audience really appreciate this as well. And, it's a really cool feeling that you would do this. It really is. So, we do appreciate that.
No, thank you so much. And I have to say, and I don't know whether these audiences are just getting so much more and more knowledgeable, but look at those questions. I mean, those are the types of questions I would expect from another FBI agent that just didn't know anything about the case. Like, your questions and your audience questions were great. I hope I helped answer them. And we're going to get all the answers. It can't come soon enough. But thank you so much for tuning in on Twitter. That's my only social media I use. There's several documentaries that are in the make, though, that I'm looking forward to doing. And hopefully you can tune in for some of those if you're not too bored. And thanks again for having me.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back sometime. Maybe we can have you on again sometime later down the road as we kind of catch up with Kohberger. And there's so many other cases hitting. We know the Long Island serial killer right now is going to become a huge case. If I can just get you real quick before you go.
Sure.
What do you make of this case? If Rex is the person that did this, could this go down, in your opinion, as one of the most prolific serial killers of all time?
Well, we'll see. They have him, I believe, dead to right on 3, and it's going to be 4. They just had to get him off the streets. I think they were really concerned that he was going to pick up somebody else and commit more crime. So they sort of got him when they had to, doing that balancing act. And so, but they'll also charge him, I believe, with number 4. The rest of the 6 that are in Long Island, those bodies, I think some may be related and some are not related.
Wow.
Also, remember, they have not run his DNA through CODIS because of a New York snag where he would have had to be convicted of either a felony or misdemeanor. This is what they're saying. We'll see how that all ferrets out. What they end up doing, but they're going to be able to compare him to unsolved cases in South Carolina, Las Vegas, and any other trips he took if they have the specific DNA to turn in. So it's not near as good as CODIS, but it's better than nothing. But I think there's a good chance that he continued to commit crimes. He would have had to find another dumping yard, and I wonder if it was South Carolina. We're going to see.
All right. That is Jennifer Coffindaffer. You can follow her on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is @Coffindaffer FBI. She's a contributor on News Nation as well, as all of you know here. Jennifer, thank you so much for your time today. I do truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Great audience. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. That was Jennifer Coffindaffer. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. I appreciate everybody tuning in for this episode of the LTL podcast. I will be back this evening at 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to debrief. We'll talk and discuss the Coffindaffer interview. I hope that you all enjoyed this. It was a long time making, but we got it together today. And Jennifer was absolutely an amazing guest. And I hope that I can get her back here sometime. And I think it's very nice of her to give the opportunity to a small channel like this to come on and have a very professional interview here. I had such a great time here with her today, and I look forward to her joining LTL again in the future. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of a break, go over and check out Tanya's channel today, Titanium Built. She probably has a stream going probably at 8:15 her regular time, and then I'll be back here at 9:15. We'll do a debrief of the show. I'd love to go back over and recap it. We can do that this evening. Come on in for the late show. I really appreciate it. I'll see you all tonight at 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Till then, have a great day and be safe. Bye, guys.